The battle had been decided before it even began. Commander Dane Luther stood at the bridge of the Vanguard, watching the enemy fleet scatter like insects before a storm. He had fought 100 battles in his lifetime, but never one as lopsided as this. Never had he commanded a ship so terrifyingly powerful that entire armadas surrendered the moment it appeared in their systems. And yet, this was the reality now. The Vanguard wasn't just a warship. It was a declaration, a final word in any argument, the product of humanity's desperate need to survive in a galaxy that had long treated them as nothing more than a nuisance. "Commander," came the voice of his tactical officer, Captain Rena Koss. "The enemy fleet is in full retreat. They're abandoning their capital and jumping to deep space. No resistance." Dane let out a slow breath. "Of course they are," he muttered. The species known as the Juhari Dominion had ruled this sector of the galaxy for over 600 years. They had crushed human colonies, enslaved human civilians, and dismissed Earth's demands for peace with laughter. The idea that humans could stand against them had always been a joke in the Dominion's halls of power. But now, there was no laughter. Doyne turned to the massive holo-display at the center of the bridge. Wreckage floated in the vastness of space, the remains of the Dominion's 3rd and 7th battle groups. The Vanguard had fired a single salvo at each of them. One barrage, no second volley required. "Status of the enemy flagship?" Dane asked. "They haven't moved, sir," Rena replied. "No power readings, no distress signals. It's like they're frozen in terror." Dane nodded. "Open a channel." A moment later, the bridge filled with the trembling face of Admiral Kur Tyne, the Dominion fleet commander. His scales, normally a deep emerald, had gone pale, a clear sign of shock. His slit-pupil eyes darted left and right as if expecting death at any moment. What have you done?" Tyne stammered. This is impossible." Dane leaned forward. "No, Admiral, this is the future. The Juhari had underestimated humanity for too long. When Earth had pleaded for a truce, the Dominion had mocked them. When Earth had fought back, the Dominion had crushed them. But after the burning of Europa Colony, humanity had stopped begging. They had stopped fighting with outdated ships and hopeless strategies. Instead, they had built Vanguard. A warship so advanced that no fleet in the known galaxy could stand against it. A weapon that could turn entire planets to dust with a single bombardment. Its armor was impenetrable, its weapons beyond anything the Dominion could comprehend. And now, the galaxy was beginning to understand. "You have one chance, Admiral," Doyne said. "Surrender your forces, disband your fleets, leave human territory forever." Admiral Tyne's mouth twitched, caught between fury and terror. "You can't possibly expect the Dominion to accept—" "Then run," Dane cut him off. "Because there will not be a third option." Silence. The Admiral's throat convulsed as he swallowed. The bridge crew waited, breath held. They had seen many battles, many deaths, but nothing like this. No blood had been spilled, no desperate fights, no heroic last stands. Just the overwhelming, terrifying realization that no force in the galaxy could stand against one ship. Then, Admiral Tyne exhaled. His shoulders slumped. "We surrender." A hushed silence fell over the bridge. Even though they had expected it, the weight of the moment still struck them hard. An entire Dominion fleet, the pride of their empire, had fallen without firing a single shot. Dane nodded. "Transmit the official surrender. If any of your ships so much as twitches the wrong way, we will erase you from existence." Tyne gave a hollow nod before the transmission cut. Rena exhaled and turned to Dane. "Sir, we've just received word. The Dominion High Command has sent out a general retreat order. The entire sector is falling back. Dane leaned back in his command chair, his mind still processing the gravity of what had just happened. It wasn't just a victory, it was a message. A war had just ended before it could begin. But deep down, Dane knew the truth. This kind of power didn't just end wars, it created them. And somewhere in the galaxy, someone was already trying to build something stronger, something that could challenge even the Vanguard. And that was a war they weren't ready for. The celebrations on the bridge of the Vanguard were muted. No cheers, no triumphant laughter, only the quiet hum of systems and the occasional exchange of glances between crew members who were still trying to grasp what had just happened. Commander Dane Luther sat in silence, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. Victory had come so easily that it felt wrong. The Dominion had spent centuries as the dominant power in the sector. They had waged countless wars, crushed rebellions, and subjugated entire species without hesitation. And yet, today, they had fled like cowards. "Sir, incoming transmission from Fleet Command," Rena announced, breaking his thoughts. "Admiral Rains wants a full debrief." Dane sighed. He had known this was coming. "Put it through." A second later, the image of Admiral Lucian Rains appeared on the central holo display. The man's face was etched with years of war, his dark eyes sharp and calculating. Unlike the rest of humanity's brass, Rains had never believed in peace with the Dominion. He had been one of the chief architects of the Vanguard project, and now, for the first time, his creation had been tested. "Commander Luther," Rains said, his tone carefully neutral, "I see the battle went as expected." "If you can call it a battle," Dane replied. Rains smirked slightly. "I trust the Dominion understands the situation now?" "They do. Their admiral surrendered without resistance. We detected a full-scale retreat across multiple systems. The Juhari Dominion is abandoning human space." Rains nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. Then the real war is about to begin." Dane frowned. "Sir? The Dominion will not let this stand, Luthar. They didn't fight because they didn't know what they were up against. But now that they've seen the Vanguard, their high command will do one of two things. Either they will collapse under the weight of their own fear, or they will adapt." Dane had considered this himself, but hearing Rains say it out loud made the unease in his gut settle deeper. The Dominion wasn't known for surrendering permanently. Their pride wouldn't allow it. If they had retreated, it wasn't out of acceptance. It was because they needed time to figure out how to strike back. "What's our next move?" Dane asked. "You stay put," Rains said. "Reinforcements are en route to secure the sector. The Vanguard is now the single most valuable asset in the entire fleet. We can't risk you chasing the Dominion into a trap." Dane clenched his jaw. "So we just sit here?" "Yes, and let them feel their defeat. Let them stew in it. Fear is a powerful weapon, Commander. Right now, the Vanguard isn't just a warship, it's a legend, and legends are harder to kill than ships." Rains disconnected, leaving the bridge in silence once more. Rena exhaled. "I hate it when he's right." Dane didn't respond. He turned his eyes to the vastness of space, where the wreckage of the Dominion fleet still drifted like the bones of ancient titans. Something about this victory felt wrong. It was too easy. Something was coming. He could feel it. And when it did, the Vanguard might not be enough. For 3 days, the Vanguard remained stationed in the ruins of the Dominion fleet. Human warships arrived in waves, securing the sector as the Juhari continued their retreat. Across human space, news of the Vanguard's victory spread like wildfire. Some called it a turning point in history. Others whispered fears of what it meant. Humanity had never possessed such overwhelming power before. But not all power was a blessing. Commander Dane Luther sat in his quarters, staring at the tactical readouts on his console. He had read the same reports over and over again, searching for something, anything, that didn't add up. There. The Dominion had abandoned everything too quickly. It wasn't just their fleets that had retreated. They had left entire planets behind, stations still operational, supply depots untouched. It was like they had fled in a panic, as if something even worse than the Vanguard had frightened them. That was the part that disturbed Dane the most. "Sir," Rena's voice came through his communication. "You need to see this." Dain sighed, pushing himself up from his desk. He made his way back to the bridge, where the crew was gathered around the main holo display. Rena gestured to the screen. "We picked up a Dominion transmission, a distress signal." Dain frowned. "From a retreating ship?" Rena shook her head. "From a Dominion world, one of the planets they abandoned. It came from Zenthis Prime, a major industrial colony." Dain's frown deepened. "They left an industrial world behind? That makes no sense. Play the signal." The bridge filled with the crackling static of a broken transmission. Then, a voice. "They left us. They left us all." The voice was panicked, filled with raw terror. "The fleets are gone. We begged them to stay, but they knew. They knew what was coming." Dane's stomach turned to ice. The message continued, broken by bursts of interference. "Not human! It's not human! We thought—" A wet, choking sound. Screams in the background. "Oh God, it's here!" Then, silence. The transmission cut out. No one spoke. A cold, sick feeling spread through the room. Rena was the first to break the silence. "That wasn't fear of us." Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "That was fear of something else." Dain clenched his fists. "Get me an analysis of that recording, find out exactly when it was sent, and get me a full scan of Zenthis Prime." The crew scrambled into action. Within moments, data flooded the screen. The distress signal had been sent 6 hours ago. But the planet— "Sir," one of the officers said, his voice shaking. "Zenthis Prime is gone." Dain turned sharply. "What do you mean, gone?" "It's just not there," the officer stammered. "No heat signatures, no power readings, no life signs, nothing. It's like the entire planet was just wiped out." A deep, heavy silence settled over the bridge. Dain felt his heartbeat slow. The Vanguard was the most powerful ship in existence. The Dominion had fled before it without firing a shot. And yet, they had left entire worlds behind, because they were running from something even worse. And whatever it was, it had just erased a planet from existence. Dain exhaled. He knew what had to be done. "Prepare for a jump," he ordered. "We're going to Zenthis Prime." Rena hesitated. "Sir, if something took out a whole planet, do we really want to go charging in blind?" Dain looked her in the eye. "If we don't, we'll never know what we're up against." The Vanguard turned, its engines burning bright as it began its jump toward Zenthis Prime, to whatever horror waited for them in the dark. The Vanguard dropped out of hyperspace into what should have been the orbit of Zenthis Prime. Instead, there was nothing. The planet, the entire planet, was gone. Commander Dain Luther stared at the holo display, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. There were no debris fields, no shattered crust or drifting remains, no sign that a world had ever existed here at all. Just emptiness. Rena swallowed hard. "Sir, is this some kind of sensor malfunction?" "Double-check everything," Dain ordered. "I want deep-range scans. I want every kind of detection we have running. I don't care if you have to measure the cosmic background radiation. Find me something." The bridge crew scrambled, working furiously to make sense of the impossible. The last known location of Zenthis Prime was right in front of them, but the planet itself had simply vanished. And yet… There, Rena whispered, pointing to the display. At first, it looked like nothing, just an empty void where a planet should have been. But as the sensors deepened their scan, something unnatural emerged. A wound in space itself. It wasn't just a lack of a planet. It was a lack of everything, a hole in reality, a tear where there should have been mass, energy, even time itself. Diane felt his pulse slow. This wasn't a superweapon. This wasn't an orbital bombardment or some kind of Dominion doomsday device. This was something else, something that didn't belong in their universe. "Sir," one of the technicians said, his voice hollow, "we're detecting whispers." Dane turned sharply. "Explain." The officer's hands trembled as he pulled up an audio frequency. It's faint, buried deep in the background noise, almost like a transmission, but it's wrong. Rena hesitated. "Play it." A moment later, the bridge filled with a low, distant murmur. It was garbled, fragmented, like a broken signal from another reality. The words were impossible to decipher, yet they carried a feeling, a sensation that slithered into the back of Dawn's mind. Something was watching them. Rena's breath hitched. That sounds almost alive. The whispering grew louder. Diane felt it in his bones now, an unnatural pressure crawling through the ship. It wasn't just sound. It was something else, something that shouldn't exist in their space. Then, the lights flickered. Alarms blared as the Vanguard systems scrambled, flickering between errors that made no sense. Gravity fluctuation detected. Hull integrity unknown. Engine output fluctuating. And then, a voice, not from the speakers, not from the consoles, not from the ship, from inside their heads. "You should not be here." Dane felt his breath seize. The entire bridge crew went silent. Every single one of them had heard it. A voice, speaking not in sound but in thought, as if something vast and unknowable had just turned its attention toward them. "You are fragile things." The whispering grew deeper, stronger. It wasn't just noise anymore. It was pressure, like the weight of something incomprehensibly massive pressing down on their reality. And then, for the first time since its creation, the Vanguard's advanced AI panicked. "Error! Error! Error! Unidentified entity detected. Threat level undefined. Suggested course of action. Run." Dane had never seen that before. The Vanguard had been designed to fight anything, to stand against entire empires without hesitation, and now it was telling him the only option was to flee. Rena's voice was tight with terror. "Sir, orders." Dane clenched his fists. Every instinct screamed to retreat, to run, to get as far away from this thing as possible. But if they left now, they would never understand what had truly happened here. They would never know what had erased an entire planet. And worst of all, they would never know if it was coming for them next. Dane forced himself to breathe. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to turn the Vanguard around and jump as far from this void as possible. But if they did that, if they fled without understanding what had happened here, it would only delay the inevitable. This thing, whatever it was, had erased a planet. There was no guarantee it wouldn't do the same to another Dominion world, to a human world, to Earth. Dane steeled himself. "Status report," he ordered, forcing the fear from his voice. The crew hesitated, but Rena moved first, her fingers flying across her console. "Systems are stabilizing, but the interference is increasing. Whatever that presence is, it's affecting the ship at a fundamental level." "Gravity distortions are intensifying," another officer reported. "It's like space itself is warping." Dine exhaled. "Tactical readout. Do we have any readings on the source?" Rena hesitated before shaking her head. "No single point of origin. It's like It's coming from everywhere at once. Dain narrowed his eyes at the display. The void, where Zenthus Prime had been, was no longer just empty. Something shifted in the darkness, just beyond the edge of detection, not an object, not a fleet, a presence, and it was watching them. You do not belong here. The voice, if it could even be called that, slithered through Dain's mind again. It wasn't a message, it wasn't a transmission, it was direct, as if reality itself had decided to speak to them. A cold dread settled over the bridge. The entire crew heard it, felt it. Dain clenched his fists. If we don't belong, then what does... The silence that followed was more terrifying than the words. And then, the stars flickered. Rena gasped. "Sir, what the hell is happening to the system?" Dain turned sharply to the viewport. Space itself twisted. The stars in the distance warped and stretched, their light bending as if something unseen was wrapping around them. Something massive. Something they couldn't even begin to comprehend. And then, the void moved. Not in the way a ship moved. Not in the way planets orbited or fleets maneuvered. It shifted, as if reality itself was being rewritten, folding in ways that defied everything physics understood. Rena's face was pale. "Sir, we're detecting readings inside the ship." Dain's heart stopped. "Inside?" Before she could respond, the lights flickered again. And then, deep within the corridors of the Vanguard, a scream echoed through the ship. Raw, primal, impossible. Dain's blood turned to ice. "Where was that?" The comms officer's hands trembled. "Deck 12, sir." Another scream, then another. The ship's AI sent a warning across all channels. Internal breach detected. Non-physical entity present. Dain shot to his feet. "Security teams, deploy to Deck 12. Seal off all critical systems." He barely had time to process the order before the Vanguard's power systems flickered again. And then, for the first time since its creation, the Vanguard's engines died. The greatest warship humanity had ever built, the unstoppable force that had made the Dominion surrender, was now dead in space. And something had just stepped aboard. Dain grabbed the armrest of his chair. "Weapons online. Full internal lockdown. No one moves alone." Rena's breathing was shaky, but she kept her focus. "Sir, if it's already inside, what do we do?" Dain clenched his jaw. There was only one answer. They survive. The Vanguard had never known fear. It was the pinnacle of human engineering, designed to stand against any enemy, to turn the tide of any battle. It was built to be unstoppable. And yet, for the first time, it felt fragile. The ship's engines were dead. Its power core flickered in and out of stability, and worst of all, something was inside. Dain's grip tightened on his armrest. "Report from Deck 12. The security officer, a younger man named Kovac, paled as he read the live feed. "Sir, we're getting scattered reports from the teams en route. Hallways are shifting." Dain's stomach twisted. "Shifting how?" "They say it's like space isn't stable down there. Corridors stretching, twisting into places that shouldn't connect. Whole sections that just shouldn't exist. Sir, I don't understand." Another scream erupted through the comms. And then, gunfire. "Security Team Bravo to bridge," a voice shouted. "Contact, we have..." Static. Then, "You struggle like insects." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, seeping into the bones of the ship itself. Dain saw some of his crew instinctively back away from their stations, as if physical distance could protect them from something so utterly alien. Then came the sound. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't technological. It was wet. A sickening, shifting slither, like something impossibly large dragging itself through corridors that were too small for it. Rena's hands trembled over her console. "Sir, we just lost contact with Security Bravo." Dane forced himself to remain calm. Deploy drones. We need visual confirmation. A few seconds later, the bridge holo display flickered to show the drone feed. The halls of Deck 12 were wrong. The clean, metallic corridors of the Vanguard had become organic, like something had grown over them. The walls pulsed, flesh-like, with dark veins running through them, twisting and spreading as if the ship itself had become infected. And then the drone's camera caught movement. A shape slithered across the frame. It was tall, hunched, with too many limbs bending the wrong way. Its skin was black like space itself, absorbing the light around it. Its head. Dain's breath hitched. There was no head. Only an ever-shifting mass of mouths, whispering, laughing, screaming in voices that were human, dominion, and things he didn't recognize. Then, the creature turned toward the drone. It didn't have eyes. It didn't need them. The whispers grew louder. The drone's camera shattered into static. Silence filled the bridge. Rena's voice was barely a whisper. What the hell was that? No one spoke. Dane finally exhaled. Lock down Deck 12. Nothing in, nothing out. The security officer hesitated. Sir, our teams... They're already gone, Doyne said, forcing his voice to stay even. We can't risk this spreading. The truth was, he didn't know if it could be contained. If this thing had already infected one deck, there was no telling how deep it had spread. Then, the whispering changed. It spoke. Your warship is a coffin. The air grew thick, like the very concept of space inside the bridge was being warped. The walls groaned, metal flexing as if the ship itself was struggling to exist. Rena's breathing was ragged. Sir, if we don't do something now, we're going to lose this entire ship. Dane's mind raced. Every decision mattered now. There was no second chance. No reinforcement fleet coming to save them. It was just them, trapped in deep space, with something that had erased an entire planet. And it wasn't just inside the ship. It was becoming the ship. Dain made his decision. Prepare for a reactor purge, he ordered. Rena snapped toward him. Sir, that could destabilize the core. If we don't do it right, we could... If we do nothing, we die, Dane cut in. Rena hesitated, then nodded. Dane turned to the comms officer. Open a ship-wide channel. The moment it was live, he spoke. This is Commander Luther. All hands, prepare for emergency procedures. We are purging the core. Repeat, we are purging the core. Throughout the ship, alarms blared. A reactor purge meant venting every last drop of raw power in the Vanguard. A desperate measure to burn out any foreign presence. If it worked, it might force whatever this thing was out of the ship. If it failed, then the Vanguard would be nothing more than a lifeless hunk of metal drifting in deep space, and they would still be trapped with it. Dain turned back to Rena. Do it. She took a deep breath and initiated the purge. Deep within the ship, the reactor screamed as its energy was ripped free, flooding the entire vessel with a violent, raw wave of power. And then, the whispers turned into screams, not human screams, not Dominion screams. Something older, something not meant to be in this reality. The lights exploded in a flash of white, and for a split second Dane saw it. Not the thing in the corridors, not the mouths, but what lay beyond the void, an impossible shape, a twisting mass of gravity and darkness, folding in on itself in ways that hurt to look at. Not a creature, a concept, a force that had no name. And in that moment, Dane knew. This thing hadn't just destroyed Zenthus Prime. It had eaten it. Then, everything went black. Dain woke to silence. Not the usual silence of deep space, the familiar hum of a warship's engines beneath his feet, the soft beeping of consoles, the murmur of officers speaking in hushed tones. this was true silence. The kind that pressed against his skull like a vice. For a brief, terrible moment, he thought he was dead. Then, a voice. Commander? Dane's eyes snapped open. A sharp pain lanced through his skull, and his vision swam. The bridge was barely lit, bathed in the dim glow of emergency power. Some consoles flickered, struggling to restart. Others were completely dead. Rena knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder. Her face was pale, her hair damp with sweat. Are you with me? Dane forced himself upright, his muscles aching. His mouth was dry, his uniform was damp. Sweat? Blood? He wasn't sure. What happened? His own voice sounded hoarse, like he had been screaming. Rena exhaled in relief. The purge worked, I think, but it nearly killed the ship. Dane looked around. The bridge crew was scattered, some still unconscious, others groaning as they came to. The ship's main holo display was offline, and the emergency lighting cast long, eerie shadows across the room. Systems? Dane asked, forcing his mind to focus. Rena grimaced. Bad. We're running on backup power. The core is offline, engines are down, and... She hesitated. Dane's gut tightened. And what? Rena swallowed. Deck 12 is... still wrong. Dane's breath slowed. I thought the purge... It burned something out of the ship, yeah, Rena said, rubbing her arms as if fighting off a chill. But it didn't undo what had already happened. That growth. The organic mass in the corridors. It's still there. A deep, gnawing unease crawled up Dane's spine. Casualties? Rena's face darkened. Security Team Bravo is gone. No remains. No sign of them. Just gone. Dawn clenched his jaw. He had known, deep down, that they wouldn't make it. But hearing it confirmed still sent a wave of guilt through him. Deck 12 is sealed, but... Rena hesitated. I don't think it's empty. A cold weight settled in Dane's chest. Meaning? Rena didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to the ship's comms officer, Kovac, who was barely staying upright at his station. Tell him, Rena said. Kovac swallowed hard. His face was ashen. Sir, he said, his voice shaking. We're still receiving transmissions from Deck 12. Dane's fingers curled into a fist. From who? Kovac licked his lips. His hands were trembling as he brought up the audio logs. The bridge speakers crackled. Then, a voice. This is Security Team Bravo. We are alive. We are trapped. Please. A wet, twisting sound. Then, another voice. Commander, it hurts. Please. Dane's blood ran cold. The transmission shouldn't exist. He had heard them die. The purge should have killed everything inside that sector of the ship. And yet, the whispers hadn't stopped. They had just changed. For a long moment, no one on the bridge spoke. Kovac turned to Dawn, his expression pleading. Sir, what do we do? Dawn inhaled slowly. Every choice led to danger. If they investigated, they risked losing more people. If they ignored it, they might be leaving something alive in their ship. Something that wasn't human anymore. The whispers intensified. It's dark. We can't feel our hands. Are we real? Are we real? Dawn made his decision. Seal off Deck 12 permanently, he ordered. Shut down all comms from that sector. No one goes in. No one comes out. Kovac hesitated, but Rena nodded grimly. Understood. Kovac's fingers hovered over the console. If we cut them off, we'll never know if they were really alive. Dane exhaled. They aren't alive. Not in a way that matters anymore. With a single keystroke, Deck 12 went silent. The whispers were gone. For now. But deep down, Dane knew the truth. They hadn't escaped whatever had infected Zenthis Prime. They had just locked it in with them, and it was only a matter of time before it found a way out. The silence after the purge felt unnatural. Even with Deck 12 sealed, the weight of what had happened lingered over the crew like a heavy fog. Every officer on the bridge moved carefully, speaking in hushed voices, as if raising their volume too high would wake something up. Dine sat in his command chair, staring at the dead holo displays. The Vanguard was still crippled, drifting powerless in deep space. They had survived, but barely, and whatever they had fought was still with them. "Rena," he said finally, "give me a full assessment. Can we get the core back online?" Rena leaned over her console, scanning what little data they had. "The purge burned out half our systems. The reactor is in lockdown mode. It'll take at least an hour to manually override. Engines are dead. Weapons are offline. Shields are at 4%. Dane exhaled slowly. They were sitting ducks. "And communications?" "Short range only," Rena said. "Long-range comms are completely fried. No way to call for help." Dane clenched his jaw. That meant no contact with Earth, no warning to the fleet about what had happened here. They were alone, and they had no idea if that thing was really gone. "Sir," Kovac spoke up, his voice hesitant. "We have another problem." Dane turned toward him. "What now?" Kovac swallowed, then hesitated before bringing something up on his screen. A motion alert. Dane's muscles tensed. "Where?" Kovac tapped a few keys. "It's faint, but we're picking up movement on Deck 12. A cold weight settled in Diane's stomach. "That's impossible," Rena whispered. "That whole sector is locked down." "It's moving inside the sealed zone," Kovac corrected, "near the maintenance corridors." Diane's thoughts raced. They had burned that thing out. They had sealed Deck 12. But now something was still moving. And then, a new alert. Kovac's face turned pale. "Sir, something is tampering with the doors." Dane stood. "Which doors?" Kovac didn't answer right away. His hands were shaking as he zoomed in on the feed. A long, silent corridor appeared on the bridge's central display. At the far end, the bulkhead to Deck 12 stood firm, locked by emergency protocols. No breaches, no sign of damage. But something was on the other side. Something that wasn't human. Then, the lights in the corridor flickered. A shadow moved behind the sealed door, just out of focus. Not a person, not a creature. Something between those things. It moved wrong, too fluid, like it wasn't fully bound by normal physics, its limbs bent in ways that defied bone and muscle, shifting unnaturally between too many shapes at once. And then, the door shook. A deep, sickening groan echoed through the ship as metal strained. Kovac whispered the words no one wanted to hear. "Sir, it's trying to get out." Dane's breath slowed. His mind snapped into focus. No hesitation, no fear, just command. "Reinforce all security locks on Deck 12, he ordered. "Divert emergency power to containment fields. If that door so much as cracks open, I want it welded shut." Rena moved fast, her fingers flying over her console. "Done. But sir, this thing is learning." Dane's jaw tightened. That was the real danger. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't some mindless beast. It had waited. It had adapted. And now it was testing their defenses, looking for a way out. Minutes passed. The lights flickered again. The bulkhead groaned, but it held. Then, silence. No more movement. No more shaking. The thing had stopped. Dane exhaled, his hands still clenched into fists. "Did we stop it?" No one answered. Then, Rena's console beeped. A single, simple notification appeared on her screen. "Deck 12 terminal. Unauthorized access detected." Rena froze. "Sir," she whispered, "it's using the ship's systems." Dane's stomach turned to ice. Before he could respond, the bridge lights flickered violently. The ship's speakers crackled to life. And then, the whispers returned. Not the mindless, chaotic whispers from before. These were different. These were shaped. And then, from the ship's comms, in a voice that was almost human, "You locked us in, but we learn." A long pause. "You are not the first." The whispering grew louder, the voices overlapping. Some were human, some were Dominion, some were unrecognizable. And then, one last message. "You will not be the last." The lights cut out. The ship went dark. And the Vanguard, the most powerful warship in human history, suddenly felt very small. Total darkness. The hum of the ship's systems was gone. The bridge, the heart of the Vanguard, was now a silent, breathless void. Dawn had spent years in space. He had fought in battles where the vacuum of space had swallowed entire fleets. But this silence? This was something else. Then, a sound. Soft at first. A rhythmic tapping, as if something was inside the walls, running its fingers across the metal bulkheads. Rena's breath was ragged. "Sir, power is completely offline. Every system, even emergency backups." Dane clenched his fists. "That's not possible." But it was. Because this wasn't just an attack. It was control. The thing in Deck 12, whatever it was, had taken the ship. And now it was playing with them. The tapping grew louder. Then, a whisper. "Are you afraid?" It didn't come from the speakers. It didn't come from the comms. It came from inside their heads. Rena shook. "Sir, I don't like this." Dane forced his voice to remain steady. "Everyone hold position." But then, movement. Across the bridge, Kovac gasped. Dane turned sharply, just in time to see Kovac rise from his seat, moving in stiff, jerking motions. His eyes were wide open, unblinking. "Kovac?" Rena whispered. Kovac didn't respond. Instead, his mouth slowly opened, far too wide, as if his jaw was coming unhinged. And then, he spoke, but it wasn't him. "We are inside." A spasm racked Kovac's body. "We learn." Then, he lunged. Dane barely had time to react before Kovac grabbed the nearest officer, his movements unnatural, too strong, too fast. The officer screamed as Kovac's fingers dug into his skin, as if he were melting into him. Dane moved. Fast. He drew his sidearm and fired. The shot hit Kovac's center mass. But he didn't fall. Instead, his body rippled, like something inside him had absorbed the impact. Then, he turned his head completely around. A deep, wet crack. And that was when Kovac smiled. Not a human smile, a thing's smile. "You cannot fight us." Then, his entire body convulsed. With a sickening, tearing sound, Kovac collapsed, or rather his form unraveled, as if his body had never been solid in the first place. The officer he had grabbed was gone, too, both of them melting into the floor, their very shapes dissolving into the ship itself. And then, the bridge lights flickered back on. The power returned, consoles sparking to life, systems rebooting one by one. The Vanguard was back online. But Kovac was gone. So was the other officer. No body, no trace, just gone. For a long, breathless moment, no one moved. Then Rena turned to Diane, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Sir, it let us go." Diane's pulse slowed. The Vanguard should have been destroyed. Whatever was inside Deck 12, whatever had become part of the ship, could have killed them all, but it hadn't. It had given them back control, because it wanted them to know something. "You are not the first. You will not be the last." Dine exhaled. "Start the engines," he ordered. Rena hesitated. "Sir, where are we going?" Dane's eyes remained fixed on the sealed doors of Deck 12. "As far away from this place as we can." Rena nodded and turned to her console. The ship rumbled as the engines reignited, pushing the Vanguard forward, away from the void, away from Zenthus Prime's grave. But Dane knew the truth. They weren't escaping. They were being allowed to leave. And somewhere in the depths of Deck 12, something was still whispering. The Vanguard surged forward, engines burning as it left the void behind. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the bridge was alive again. Power restored, systems stable. The hum of the ship's core thrummed beneath their feet, steady and strong. But no one felt safe. Not after what had happened. Not after what they had seen. Dane sat in silence, staring at the sealed bulkhead that led to Deck 12. It had not made a sound since Kovac, since the thing wearing Kovac had dissolved into the floor. But the whispers hadn't stopped, even with the comms cut, even with the doors sealed. He could feel them, waiting. "Sir," Rena spoke softly. Dane looked up. Her face was pale, but steady. "We've cleared the sector," she said. "We're on course for the nearest fleet rendezvous point. Estimated arrival in 16 hours. Dane nodded, though the weight in his chest did not lift. "Any sign of pursuit?" Rena shook her head. "Number whatever was at Zenthus Prime." She hesitated. "It isn't following." Dane exhaled slowly. That was worse somehow. It wasn't chasing them because it didn't need to. It had already won. Hours passed. The crew worked in silence, going through the motions. They ran diagnostics, checked the hull, scanned for any trace of whatever had infected Deck 12. Everything came back clear, but Dane knew better, because it wasn't something that could be detected. It was inside the ship, maybe not in the circuits or the engines, maybe not in the walls, but it was there, just beneath the surface. In them. Rena sat across from him in the dim glow of the command deck. "We have to tell Fleet Command." Dane closed his eyes. "Tell them what?" Rena hesitated. "That there's something out there, something that—" She swallowed. "Something that erased a planet." Dane looked at her. "And what do you think they'll do, Rena?" She didn't answer, because they both knew. They would investigate, they would send another fleet and another, until humanity had prodded too far into something that should not be touched. Until they found out why the Dominion had run. Until they realized that the Vanguard hadn't defeated anything. It had simply survived long enough to be left alone. For now. You are not the first. Dane ran a hand down his face, exhaustion weighing on him. Those words had been meant as a warning, or worse, an invitation. The Vanguard reached its destination. A human fleet waited for them, welcoming them back with cheers, hailing them as heroes. But Dane felt none of it, because deep in the heart of his ship, on a deck that no one would ever step foot in again, the whispers never stopped. The galactic fleet hovered above the smoldering ruins of Earth's last orbital defenses. Victory had been declared. Admiral Zalzor of the Vathari Dominion stood aboard the command deck of his flagship, gazing at the devastated blue planet below. Reports poured in from fleet captains, each confirming the same thing. Humanity was finished. The final resistance had been crushed, and the Dominion's conquest of the Sol system was complete. The Vathari were a proud and ancient species, ruling vast sectors of the galaxy. Humanity, a young and defiant upstart, had dared to resist their rule. For years, the war had dragged on, with Earth refusing to kneel, but the Dominion had finally brought its full force to bear. The orbital bombardment had reduced entire continents to rubble, leaving nothing but scattered survivors hiding in underground bunkers. The great cities of Earth, New York, Tokyo, London, lay in ruins. There was no fleet left, no standing army to resist them. A holographic transmission flickered to life before Admiral Zalzor, displaying the smirking face of High Chancellor Rethzir. "It is done, then?" the Chancellor asked. "Yes, High Chancellor. Humanity has been eradicated as a military threat," Zalzor said, his mandibles clicking in satisfaction. "The planet will be occupied within the next rotation. Their surviving population will be subjugated, as per your orders." Rethzir nodded. "Good. The Dominion has no need for rebels. Make an example of them. Let the galaxy know what happens to those who resist our will." With that, the transmission ended, and the Admiral allowed himself a moment to bask in victory. The war had been brutal, but the outcome was inevitable. The Dominion was an empire spanning thousands of star systems. Humanity had been nothing more than a stubborn annoyance. Then the alarms blared. A shrill, piercing wail echoed through the command deck, and officers scrambled to their stations. Zalzor turned sharply. "Report!" "Admiral," one of the sensor officers stammered, We're detecting multiple warp signatures, massive energy surges at the edge of the system." Zalzor frowned. This was impossible. The human fleet had been annihilated. Earth's shipyards had been reduced to ashes. Where could reinforcements be coming from? "Put it on the main display," he ordered. The holographic screen flickered, and the bridge crew collectively recoiled. Space at the edge of the Sol system twisted and burned as something emerged from the void. Something massive. No, not something. Many things. Hundreds of ships materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls reflecting the distant light of the sun. They weren't like the fragile, outdated vessels the Vathari had fought and destroyed before. These were monstrous warships, titanic behemoths bristling with weapons that pulsed with barely contained power. Zalzor felt a cold dread seep into his bones. "By the void. What are those?" "Dreadnoughts," a voice came from behind him. The Admiral turned to see a captured human officer, bound in restraints, staring at the screen with a grim smile. The prisoner, Captain Elias Graves of the United Earth Navy, had been taken alive just days ago. Zalzor had ignored him, assuming his people were already extinct. "Impossible," Zalzor hissed. "Humanity had no such fleet. We destroyed their shipyards." Graves chuckled, a hollow, dark sound. "Yeah, you destroyed what we wanted you to see." Zalzor's mandibles twitched in fury. "Explain yourself, human. You thought Earth was our stronghold?" Graves smirked. "That was just our home. Our real fleets were elsewhere, preparing for this moment. We saw what happened to the other species you conquered. We knew this day would come." Zalzor turned back to the display. More ships poured out of warp, an unrelenting tide of steel and firepower. The largest of them loomed at the heart of the formation, an immense vessel unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. It dwarfed even Zalzor's flagship, a monstrous colossus designed for one purpose: total annihilation. A transmission suddenly cut through their comms, overriding their encryption. The Dominion's fleet was being hailed. Zalzor hesitated for a brief moment before accepting the transmission. The screen flickered again, and the image of a human admiral appeared. A woman with cold, steel-gray eyes and a uniform adorned with the insignia of the United Earth Navy. "This is Admiral Catherine Mercer of the UNSV Warhammer," she said, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "To the Vathari fleet occupying Sol, you have one chance. Surrender now or be destroyed." Silence fell over the bridge. Zalzor's officers looked to him, waiting for his response. He bared his fangs in rage. "You think you can threaten us, human? We are the Vathari Dominion. We crushed your world. Time's up," Mercer interrupted. "Open fire." The display flared white as the first volley struck. The battle for Earth had only just begun. The silence before the storm lasted no more than a second. Then, the dreadnoughts opened fire. From the massive hulls of the United Earth, Navy's warships came lances of energy so intense they turned the void of space into a battlefield of light and fury. The first volley struck true, slamming into the Dominion's outermost vessels with horrifying precision. Shield generators, designed to withstand conventional human weapons, buckled and collapsed under the sheer power of the onslaught. Explosions ripped through the Vathari fleet. Battleships that had once rained fire upon Earth's surface were now torn apart like brittle toys. Fireballs erupted in the cold vacuum of space, consuming crews who had believed the battle was already won. Admiral Zalzor barely had time to react. "Evasive maneuvers! Raise the defensive grid! Return fire now!" he bellowed. The bridge erupted into chaos. Officers scrambled to relay orders as the Dominion's fleet desperately tried to organize a counterattack. Plasma turrets and ion lances fired wildly into the darkness, but it was clear within moments that something was horribly wrong. The human dreadnoughts weren't just big. They were fast. Dominion warships were designed for attrition warfare, slowly advancing and overwhelming enemies with sheer firepower and numbers. But these human behemoths moved with unnatural agility, dodging through the chaos of battle like predators among prey. Then came the second wave. The Warhammer, Admiral Mercer's flagship, surged forward, leading the assault. Dozens of massive cannons along its hull unleashed a devastating barrage that obliterated an entire squadron of Vathari cruisers in an instant. The Tyrant's fall, another dreadnought, tore through the Dominion's formation, its railguns piercing even the heaviest shields like they were paper. The Dominion's grand fleet, the same force that had raised Earth's surface, was being ripped apart. Zalzor's mind reeled. This was impossible. The humans should have been defeated. They should have been scattered, broken, begging for mercy. Instead, they had come back stronger, with weapons the Dominion had never seen before. Desperate, Zalzor turned to his weapons officer. "Target their lead ship. I want that dreadnought destroyed." The officer's claws shook as he relayed the command. The Vathari's heaviest warships aligned their sights on the Warhammer. A storm of plasma torpedoes and antimatter lances surged toward the human flagship. The void itself seemed to shudder under the sheer amount of firepower unleashed. For a moment, Zalzor felt a sliver of relief. No ship, no matter how powerful, could withstand a direct strike from the full might of the Dominion's fleet. Then the Warhammer's shields flared. Instead of collapsing, they absorbed the impact, dispersing the energy harmlessly across their surface. The torpedoes detonated, but the damage was minimal. The dreadnought emerged from the barrage unscathed. What technology is this?" Zalzor whispered. The captured human, Captain Elias Graves, still standing in his restraints at the back of the bridge, chuckled darkly. "You're not fighting the same Earth you thought you conquered." Zalzor turned to him in fury. "What did you do?" Graves grinned. "We knew you were coming. We've been preparing for decades." The Dominion had always assumed that humanity was reckless, that their resistance was an act of desperation rather than strategy. But the truth was far more terrifying. Humanity hadn't lost the war. They had played dead. The old fleets that the Vathari had obliterated. They were sacrifices, outdated ships meant to give the illusion of weakness. The shipyards the Dominion had bombed into oblivion. Decoys. The real war effort had been happening off-world, in hidden bases scattered throughout deep space. Entire fleets had been built in the darkness, beyond the reach of the Dominion's gaze. And now, they had returned. The Vathari weren't fighting desperate rebels. They were facing an entire species that had spent decades mastering the art of war. A new transmission interrupted the bridge's chaos. Admiral Mercer's face appeared once more, her expression cold and merciless. Admiral Zalzor, she said, I gave you a chance to surrender. You chose otherwise. Now, we end this. Before Zalzor could respond, the Warhammer fired its main cannon. A beam of pure energy, brighter than a dying star, tore through space. It slammed into the Dominion's flagship, a colossal battlecruiser at the heart of the formation. The shields didn't even have time to fail. The entire ship exploded instantly, vaporized by the sheer force of the impact. Zalzor's mandibles trembled. He had seen planetary bombardments with less destructive force than that single shot. The Dominion was losing. No, they had already lost. Sir, a Vathari officer whispered in horror, our ships are breaking formation. The fleet is in full retreat. Zalzor's mind spun. The Vathari never retreated. They were conquerors, the dominant force in the galaxy. But now they were nothing more than prey. Captain Graves exhaled slowly, watching the battlefield unfold on the view screen. He shook his head. You should have left us alone. The Vathari had declared victory too soon. Now, humanity would teach them what real war looked like. And Earth never forgave. The Vathari fleet was in full retreat. What had begun as a triumphant display of Dominion supremacy had turned into an unthinkable nightmare. Their warships, once so confident in their conquest, were now scattering like insects before a wildfire. Admiral Zalzor could barely process the reality unfolding before him. The Vathari Dominion did not retreat. In all their years of galactic conquest, no species had ever pushed them back. Until now. But retreat did not mean survival. The human dreadnoughts were relentless. They moved with terrifying coordination, cutting off escape routes and obliterating any Vathari vessel that strayed too far from the failing formation. The Dominion's fleet had entered the Sol system as an unstoppable armada. Now, it was a broken swarm of fleeing wreckage. Zalzor's personal flagship, the Vakari, had suffered severe damage. The once mighty vessel shuddered as emergency protocols struggled to keep its systems from failing completely. Fires raged on multiple decks, and the screams of dying crew filled the comms channels. A communications officer, his voice trembling, called out, "Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from over 200 ships. Many have lost all power. The humans, they are boarding them." Zalzor's mandibles clenched. Boarding? The Vathari had always assumed humans fought like prey, defensive, desperate, weak, but these were not the humans they had studied. These were something else entirely. He turned to his tactical officer. "Deploy all remaining fighters. Buy us time to escape." The officer hesitated. "Sir, we don't have enough left. Our squadrons were—" A deep shudder ran through the ship as another explosion rocked the hull. The Vakari was taking direct fire, and then the worst possible thing happened. The lights on the bridge flickered and died. A single sound replaced them, a deep, mechanical hum. It was the sound of a boarding breach. Zalzor barely had time to reach for his sidearm before the reinforced blast doors at the far end of the bridge exploded inward. Through the smoke and fire, they emerged. Humans, not the frail diplomats or trembling prisoners the Vathari had encountered before. These were soldiers, clad in black combat armor that pulsed with a strange, shifting energy. Their weapons were unlike anything Zalzor had ever seen. Sleek, efficient, designed for war on a level beyond Dominion understanding. At their head stood Captain Elias Graves, freed from his restraints, wearing a blood-stained Vathari officer's coat over his human battle armor. Graves looked at Zalzor with a cold, knowing smile. "Told you we were just getting started," he said. Zalzor's mind raced. How? How had Graves gotten free? How had the humans breached their flagship? Had the Dominion truly underestimated them this badly? A Vathari guard lunged forward, but before he could fire, Graves put a single round through his skull. The alien crumpled instantly. Zalzor reached for his own weapon. He never got the chance to use it. Graves moved faster than Zalzor had thought possible, grabbing the Admiral by the throat and slamming him against the burning console. The Vathari's mandibles clicked in panic as he struggled against the human's grip. "You don't look so high and mighty now, do you?" Graves growled. "Not so tough when your fleet's burning, huh?" Zalzor gasped, his vision blurring. "Your species was supposed to be inferior." Graves barked out a laugh. "Yeah, we hear that a lot." He shoved Zalzor to the floor, his boot pressing down hard on the Admiral's chest. "You made one big mistake, bug." Zalzor wheezed. What mistake?" Graves leaned in close, his eyes gleaming with something primal, something vengeful. "You didn't finish the job." With a swift motion, Graves raised his weapon and fired. The last thing Admiral Zalzor saw was a flash of blue light before his world went dark. Across the battlefield, the Dominion collapsed. With their flagship leaderless and their warships being systematically eradicated, the remaining Vathari forces attempted a full-scale surrender. But Earth did not accept surrender so easily. The dreadnoughts kept firing. Boarding teams continued their brutal sweep of captured vessels, ensuring that no Vathari officer would live to wage war again. The Dominion had razed Earth, murdered billions, and laughed as they declared victory. Now they would learn what vengeance looked like. Admiral Mercer watched from the bridge of the Warhammer, her expression unreadable. "Status report," a lieutenant responded. "The last major Dominion warships are disabled. Some are trying to jump to warp, but—" A distant explosion lit up the view screen as another escaping Vathari vessel was annihilated. "They're not getting far." Mercer exhaled slowly. This was justice, but it was also just the beginning. She turned to her officers. "We send a message to the rest of the galaxy," she ordered. The comms officer nodded. Moments later, a broadcast went out, one that would echo across every Dominion world, every conquered system, every species that had ever suffered under Vathari rule. The message was simple. Earth is not conquered, humanity stands, and now we are coming for you. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The galaxy trembled. For centuries, the Vathari Dominion had ruled with an iron grip. Their fleets were unmatched, their power unquestioned. They had crushed empires, annihilated civilizations, and rewritten history as they saw fit. And yet, in a single battle, they had lost everything. The fall of the Dominion's grand fleet at Earth was not just a military defeat. It was a message. The species they had dismissed as primitive, the race they had sworn to exterminate, had not only survived, but had returned with a vengeance so brutal, so merciless, that it sent shockwaves across the stars. The broadcast from Admiral Mercer echoed across Dominion space. Millions of Vathari civilians watched in horrified silence as the once mighty fleet burned, as their warriors were slaughtered, and as the humans delivered a chilling declaration of war. Earth is not conquered. Humanity stands, and now we are coming for you. Panic spread like wildfire. On the Dominion homeworld of Zrakvar, the High Chancellor Rethzir stood in his private chamber, mandibles twitching as he replayed the footage for the third time. He could not believe what he was seeing. The Warhammer and its dreadnoughts had torn through the Grand Fleet like it was nothing. The admiral he had trusted, Zalzor, had been killed aboard his own ship, his corpse likely floating somewhere in the cold void. The unstoppable armada that had razed Earth had been hunted down like prey. This was not how it was supposed to happen. Rethzir's advisors stood behind him, their normally arrogant postures stiff with fear. One of them, Minister Korath, finally spoke. "High Chancellor," he said carefully, we must prepare for the worst." Rethzir turned sharply. "The worst?" "The worst was supposed to be our victory." He slammed a clawed fist on the table. "We wiped out their defenses. We burned their world. How could they have built such a fleet in secret?" The other advisors exchanged uneasy glances. Finally, another minister spoke. "We underestimated them." Rethzir's eyes burned with fury. "We dominate this galaxy. Humanity was just another rebellious species, another empire to be crushed." Korath shook his head. "No, High Chancellor. They were never an empire." Rethzir narrowed his eyes. "What are you saying?" The minister exhaled. "Empires fight for resources. They conquer for control. The humans are not fighting for either. They are fighting for revenge. And that makes them more dangerous than anything we've ever faced." Silence filled the chamber. Because they all knew he was right. Empires could be reasoned with. Civilizations could be negotiated with. But a species fighting for vengeance? There was no stopping that. And then the alarms blared. A panicked officer rushed into the room, eyes wide with terror. "High Chancellor, the humans are here!" For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Rethzir stepped forward. "What?" the officer gulped. "A massive fleet has just dropped out of warp at the edge of Dominion space. Their warships, their dreadnoughts. They are advancing at full speed." Rethzir's blood ran cold. They had no time. The war hadn't just begun. It was already at their doorstep. At the helm of the Warhammer, Admiral Mercer stood tall, her gaze fixed on the holographic display of the Dominion's border defenses. The enemy stations were scrambling to react, but it was already too late. The humans were here. "Admiral," a bridge officer reported, "enemy defenses are powering up. They are preparing to fire." Mercer exhaled. "Let them." The Warhammer and its fleet did not slow down. They did not open negotiations. They simply fired first. A wall of energy and kinetic destruction surged forward. Railguns capable of tearing through planets, plasma lances that burned like miniature stars. Humanity's full arsenal was unleashed in one single, terrifying barrage. The Dominion's border defenses, once considered impenetrable, shattered in seconds. Space itself seemed to tremble as human warships tore through Vathari installations, their precision strikes surgical, brutal, and relentless. Within minutes, entire defensive stations were nothing but floating wreckage. For centuries, the Dominion had ruled as gods. Now, they were running. Mercer watched as Dominion warships attempted to flee deeper into their own space. She did not let them. "Deploy hunter squadrons," she ordered. From the hangars of Earth's warships, sleek, black interceptors launched into the void. They moved with terrifying speed, hunting down escaping Vathari vessels like wolves chasing wounded prey. Across the Dominion's border worlds, chaos erupted. Civilian populations, once confident in the safety of their mighty empire, now screamed in terror as human warships darkened their skies. Cities burned, military bases crumbled, and unlike the Vathari, who had left survivors to spread fear, the humans were different. They left no one behind. Every military installation was systematically wiped out. Every warship was hunted to the last. This was not war. This was retribution. On a Dominion-controlled colony, a terrified governor tried desperately to send out a distress signal. His claws trembled as he activated the transmission beacon, hoping, praying that someone, somewhere, would send help. Then, the screen flickered. A human appeared. Admiral Mercer. Her expression was cold, her eyes like steel. "This is Admiral Mercer of the United Earth Navy," she said calmly. "Your leaders have led you into ruin. Your empire is dying. Your fleet is gone. There is no escape." The governor swallowed hard, his mandibles clattering in fear. Mercer continued. "The Dominion burned Earth. They slaughtered billions of innocent lives." She leaned forward. "And now, we are here to return the favor." The governor's breathing grew frantic. Please, we are just civilians. We surrender." Mercer did not blink. "There is no surrender." The transmission cut out. Moments later, the colony was erased from existence. From the ruins of their empire, the Vathari finally understood the truth. Humanity was not an empire to be conquered. They were a storm, a force of nature that had been unleashed upon the stars, and they would not stop until the Dominion was ashes. The Dominion was collapsing, system by system, world by world. Entire planets that had once flown the Vathari banner now burned beneath the black hulls of Earth's warships. The galaxy's once mighty conquerors found themselves facing a force they could not comprehend, a force driven not by conquest, not by greed, but by pure, unrelenting hatred. There was no diplomacy, no offers of surrender, only fire. On the frozen colony of Jarkelis, the sky split apart as the first human dreadnoughts entered orbit. The Vathari governor, a creature who had overseen the enslavement of 24 human cities during the occupation of Earth, watched in horror from the safety of his bunker. His mind clung to the old arrogance. Surely they would offer terms. Surely the humans would want prisoners or territory. But the humans did not hail them. They did not negotiate. They simply began the extermination. Orbital bombardments hammered the colony's defenses, reducing centuries of Vathari architecture to molten slag in mere minutes. Anti-air batteries that had stood for generations were reduced to craters before they could fire a single shot. And when the smoke cleared, the humans came down. They moved in perfect formations, black armored infantry, cold and methodical. They gave no quarter. Entire Vathari cities were dragged from their homes. Military officers were executed on sight. Civilians who had cheered during the conquest of Earth were lined up in the streets and left to rot. By nightfall, Jarkelis belonged to Earth. No prisoners, no survivors. The humans didn't even bother raising their own flag. They left the ruins empty, a warning to every Dominion world that still remained. Deep within the Vathari Dominion, whispers spread. The humans weren't simply retaliating for the war. They were avenging every atrocity the Vathari had ever committed. For centuries, the Dominion had enslaved weaker species. They had razed worlds, executed entire populations, and written off entire civilizations as nothing more than footnotes in history. Now those sins were being repaid in full, one massacre at a time. On Yaros Prime, the Dominion had once forced captured humans to build monuments to Vathari victory, great towers made of metal and bone, where human slaves had died for the first time in thousands of years. The galaxy was silent. The war was over. The Vathari Dominion, an empire that had once stretched across thousands of star systems, was gone. Its homeworlds were reduced to barren wastelands, its fleets turned to drifting wreckage, its rulers executed with the same merciless efficiency with which they had once ruled. The species that had enslaved entire civilizations, raised planets, and rewritten history as they saw fit had been erased. Not conquered, not subjugated, erased. The galaxy did not mourn them, but it feared what had taken their place. The United Earth Navy, the dreadnoughts, the black-armored soldiers, the unstoppable war machine that had brought the Dominion to its knees, should have ruled the stars after their victory. They had the firepower, they had the technology, they could have built their own empire, subjugated weaker species, become the new dominant force in the galaxy. But they didn't. As suddenly as they had arrived, humanity vanished. The dreadnoughts that had darkened the skies above Vathari homeworlds disappeared into the void. The soldiers that had executed Dominion leaders one by one were never seen again. They left behind no occupied worlds, no ruling government, no demands, only ruins. It was as if they had never been there at all, except for the nightmares they left behind. In the aftermath of the war, the surviving species gathered in secret. The once mighty empires of the galaxy, the Taraki, the Zillions, the Othraki Confederacy, met on neutral ground to discuss one thing only: the humans. "We must learn from the Vathari's mistake," one Othraki diplomat said, his voice shaking. "Humanity was underestimated. The price was extinction." "They are gone now," a Taraki warlord growled. "Why should we fear them?" The others exchanged nervous glances. Are they? That was the question no one could answer. No one had seen a human since the war ended. No distress signals, no new colonies, no ambassadors, no broadcasts, no signs of life at all. It was as if they had simply disappeared. And yet, their warning remained. Across the ruins of Vathari space, the message still echoed through abandoned comms relays, etched into the shattered remains of planetary outposts. A final reminder, a final threat. "We are watching, we are waiting. Strike at us again, and we will return. And this time, we will not leave anything behind." The centuries passed. A new galactic order formed. Old empires fell, new ones rose. But none dared to claim the space where the Vathari had once ruled. It remained untouched, the haunted remains of a species that had been wiped from existence. Travelers whispered of strange anomalies in the abandoned sectors, ships that never returned, fleets that simply vanished. And in the dark, among the wreckage of dead planets, some swore they saw them, black warships moving without sound, appearing only for an instant before disappearing back into the void. A ghost fleet. A reminder that somewhere out there, humanity still watched, waiting, ready. On a lonely outpost at the edge of the galaxy, an automated distress signal flickered to life. A cargo freighter, missing for weeks, had suddenly reappeared, drifting in space. A salvage team was sent to investigate. When they boarded, they found no crew, no signs of struggle. Only a single message, written in old Terran script, burned into the walls of the bridge. 3 words: "We never left." The galaxy shuddered. Because now, they finally understood. Humanity was not a race. It was not an empire. It was a warning, and it would never fade.